Oh my God. Yeah, you've been a little loud, so if you can keep it quiet, that would be great. Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and with me today is Courtney Stewart. Courtney, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good. I don't appreciate. There have been people who have been suggesting that I'm making this up. I swear to God, she is dancing every single time when that's what she's doing. That's what she's doing when the music
Every
is
time.
up. Every
Every
single
time.
time she's doing that on the back end, and I was like, "Where's the screenshot button?"
It's my ADHD going wild because I'm just like, it's dance time. Yeah. I'm
I'm
not
going to
doing anything else,
broadcast.
so why not?
What I'm going to
It's
do
really
is
fun.
I'm going to leave it so that what you see on your end is the introduction and all that other stuff, and you hear that, but everybody else sees your camera, and I'm just going to put it full screen, and
Sure.
okay, here I
If
was
I
trying
was
to like,
shy, I wouldn't be on YouTube.
yeah, I suppose that's true. Okay, all right, and I do want to address the rumors
Oh,
too. I have been viciously maligned by a lamp. Actually, the lamp has been okay to me, but the lamp has gone after a friend of mine. The lamp has gone after my $400 suit. Don't know why. Wasn't instigated. It's just not. Um, and I think we need to settle this and de-escalate this because it'd be a shame if something happened to that lamp.
I often have no idea what he's talking about, guys. Just
Most
don't
of the
worry
most of the
about
time, you have no idea, and that's okay. That's okay. Um, you don't need to know. It's a need to know
it.
basis.
Uh,
Nate Brody's lamp. Nate Brody's lamp
mm-hmm.
has been making some serious allegations against Nicholas Lamar Souter's $400 suit, and I just think this could escalate out of control. I think we need to
$400
so
suit.
yeah. So we'll see what happens there. So I do have. I really want to get to the show. We've started a poll, and you can see that poll up there. We'll discuss the poll. We'll discuss the show because I've been very excited about this, and also we're going to have Dr. Carey back for what was originally scheduled for today, which was with Ozzy. So I That's going to be, I think, a spectacular show. I'm really looking forward to this one because this is a topic I've been very interested in. We're going to cover one thing, which is the recent news has been rather extraordinary. What almost appears like rendition and/or kidnapping. It's not kidnapping, assuming there's probable cause. There's no evidence there's probable cause, and there are no receipts. But these citizens just being taken right off the streets in Portland. Portland has sued to get the government to stop. Donald Trump has said he's going to expand this program from Portland, Oregon, to all 50 states. It's a troubling program. We've been discussing this quite heavily. We now have some other news that ties into this, which is also really, at this point, in my view, extremely troubling. And In Time is going to make a prediction. Every now and then we sit there and we take a look at what's going on and we make predictions. On occasion, we do get them quite wrong. We took a look at all the data early on and said we were going to predict that the Democratic nominee was going to be Bernie Sanders. Oops. Yes, something went very sideways all of a sudden. Well, we had looked at all the data. We thought it would be Bernie Sanders. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere. I mean, Biden had been knocked out. I'm sorry. Biden had been knocked out. I stand by the fact that we actually,
Yeah.
we looked at the evidence and we made the right call based on the evidence. But Bernie, I mean, not Bernie, what's the name, came out of nowhere. So we called that one wrong. We on In Time are now prepared to predict that what you're going to see starting today is a flurry of executive orders, attempting to do several things. One, drastically curtailing a number of constitutional rights, starting with the First Amendment. Two, assaulting liberal institutions. And three, trying to expand executive powers. And we believe that starting today, you're going to see a flurry of executive orders designed to do just that. Now, we suggested a couple days ago that something like this may happen, that it would be the next sign that this administration is really starting to get kind of out of control and significant overreach. And for concerns, these are executive orders that Trump is going to say he can't, he's empowered to do. I think it's going to go through the courts. One of the reasons we're suggesting this is The Guardian has reported as of today that John Yoo, who was the one who helped with the post hoc rationalization for waterboarding. Waterboarding had been, waterboarding's a war crime. We said it was a war crime. Everybody said it's a war crime. We've said it was a war crime. It was a war crime when it was done to us. And he was able to come up with a post hoc argument for why it was not illegal and why we should be allowed to do it. This was an attempt to take something that was illegal and just find any way to make it legal. And this is what this man does. And it turns out he has been in consultation with the Trump administration on how to justify a number of executive orders. He has now told The Guardian that he has helped Trump draft a large number of executive orders, which it looks like Trump is going to come out. Trump on Fox News Sunday said that he was reserving the right to challenge the results of the election if he doesn't like them. This, again, is unprecedented. It was unprecedented the last time he did it, and experts are now starting to say that if he does this, it could. We'll get to that. That'll be another show. But as of today, he has issued his first executive order. Yeah, he's issued his first executive order on immigration, saying that illegal immigrants, or undocumented immigrants, should no longer count towards the census. Now, this appears to be retroactive, so this would be going with the 2020 census, which, by the way, did not ask that question, so there's no way to know who is an undocumented immigrant or not. That question was removed at the request of the Republican Party. Nonetheless, what he is going to suggest is drastically reducing the population as tallied by the census in states like California. This would reduce the number of representatives that they have in the House, drastically reducing their power. Since in these cases, in the vast majority of these cases, these would be Democratic seats that are getting lost. This would represent a significant reduction in the number of representatives that would be in the House that would be Democratic. Now, truth be told, I do see some genuine arguments for that, but those are arguments that should be made, and they should be made for the next census, as every other dispute has always been done before the census. I'm not saying that I necessarily even think he's wrong, but the only possible reason to do it at this point is to reduce Democratic opposition to him. He cannot do this retroactively, and he cannot do it by executive order. Nonetheless, John Yoo has confirmed that he helped draft this in an attempt to justify the reducing of the population of a number of states. And there are states like Texas that are going to get hit hard by this. But if you crunch the numbers, the Democrats get hit significantly harder than the Republicans. I think this is worth considering and discussing. But since this order just came out, and since we now have the Guardian report saying that there is a large number of these that appear to have been drafted, we believe that we are going to see in the next month a flurry of executive orders. We also believe he will be targeting the First Amendment. We believe he will be expanding his military powers, especially powers to detain people. He is already detaining people. He has gotten around posse comitatus, which would prohibit him from doing these things. He's gotten around it by using ICE, using immigration officials to detain protesters. Because they're not military, and thus he's not violating the Constitution. It's staggering. We covered it extensively yesterday and the day before because we do believe that it's unprecedented and a marked change from how this presidency has been working. None of that is the topic of today, so we will move on. But since we've been covering that extensively, I figured we're airing. I had to cover it. So today's topic. Was Courtney like? No, actually, I'm not even gonna. Okay, I was gonna do a really bad. I was gonna do a comparison, but that joke's too far. So I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna.
Oh dear.
You know what? If I can't make fun of Courtney, who can I make fun of? So today we have on Dr. Richard Carrier. Dr. Carrier, how are you?
I'm doing all right.
And there is a bit of a lag, just so everybody's aware. We're going to have a couple second lag. We were going to try to connect through Skype, which has no lag, but unfortunately we couldn't do that. So we're using the little more laggy connection here. I do apologize. But just so everyone's aware, so when we start talking over each other, if they're talking over me, it's probably the lag because they're all polite. If I'm talking over them, I'm just probably ignoring them. So we're here to discuss what religion was Hitler. Now, there's a whole bunch of claims. Christians like to claim sometimes in... sorry, what?
Say the topic again?
What religion was Adolf Hitler?
Oh, what religion? Yeah, okay. You just... you said that so jumbled, like, together.
Yeah,
I was like, I'm not sure people caught that. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
That's good.
No, my family's the same way. They're just like, we don't know what he said, but they've learned this art that you have not. Tuning me out, just like you do.
It sounded like a sarcastic side note. I was like, I'm not sure people know that you're being serious.
Girl, I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, okay. So I've met a lot of Christians, and I think sometimes they really don't think he was an atheist. They're just trolling atheists, and they know that's kind of a trigger. He was an atheist, and so that proves that atheism is terrible. And I think a great many do think he was an atheist. I think there's evidence against that. We'll talk about all that. But there are people who say he was Christian. He certainly proclaimed that. I'm not sure that's necessarily a defensible position, but I'm not an expert. We're not experts. We now do have a historian with us, so this is unusual for in time. We have somebody who's actually qualified to opine on the subject. It makes me uncomfortable too. I don't know what to do about it, but he is here. What were you gonna say, Courtney?
I'll ask it later. I think when we're more into the topic, I have kind of a point to raise, but yeah.
Oh, perfect. All right. So once again, what we have now is a poll, and you can what religion was Hitler? Vote 1 for none, 2 for Christian, 3 for deist, and vote 4 for Nordic blood. And we'll sort of discuss, I think, what that means. But there should have been an other, and I don't know where the other went. The other, you know what? I'm gonna close the poll and add other because I think that was actually supposed to be. So I will address that. But so, Dr. Carrier, thank you so much for joining us, and could you maybe sort of introduce us into this topic a bit more?
Yeah, it's actually weird that I'm an expert in this, but I am. I actually have a peer-reviewed article for German Studies Review published on it, although it's specifically on a particular document called the Table Talk. And I actually started this long saga of exposing the English translation of this as fraudulent, which has kind of upset Hitler studies, and now I'm a footnote in a lot of history books about this, that you have to actually go back to the German. in my article on this, I also called out that there might be problems with the German. Like, there's a lot that hasn't been done on this text. And Professor Mikael Nielsen, Swedish professor in Europe, has been going all damn since. He's inspired by my article to, like, go talk to living witnesses of people connected to this story. He's digging through archives, reading old letters. He's, like, done, like, really amazing stuff, and he's really exposed a lot else is wrong, even with the German. Even the German text is not a reliable account of what Hitler said. And all of these, usually the claims that Hitler's an atheist, are based on quotes from this book, the Table Talk. And so that's, I'm, sort of inadvertently became an expert on this. And the only reason that is because Dan Barker, Freedom from Religion Foundation, FFRF itself, paid me $50 to research 3 German quotes from it. And that turned into a whole rabbit hole where, that was not, I figured 3 German quotes, that's easy. I can give you context, translation, whole deal, easy. I could do that in an hour, maybe less, depending on how difficult it is. No, it was days of work, because it turns out that they were taken from the French translation, which was taken from one of the German texts. So there's actually 2 German texts, and they're wildly disagreeing. And so, like, there's a lot of problems with it. And so I ended up having to do this whole research project. I said, well, I might as well get it published under peer review. So I consulted with some German studies experts and so on, and wrote up an article. And so that ended up in GSR. And that's reproduced in my book, Hitler, Homer, Bible, Christ, which that's why it has the title Hitler on that book, is it because my one peer-reviewed study on Hitler is in there. And it has a bunch of my other peer-reviewed stuff on those other subjects in the title. So that's how I ended up being an expert on this. And of course, in order to interpret the German in context and so on, I had to actually study the scholarship on Hitler's religion and what words meant at the time, because word meanings change and so on. So that's how I ended up accidentally an expert on Hitler's religion. So that's what I'm doing here.
So the question,
I can give you a spoiler if you want. But,
well, please, and then I did want to point out that's actually you became a accidental. That's the same story for the historicity of, wasn't that like, that was your patrons, but still, that was an accident too. You're just sort of an accidental expert on a lot of things, but please continue.
Well, that at least made sense, because that's in ancient history and in ancient religion, which actually is my PhD field. To do World War II Hitler studies is way out of field. The overlap was paleography, textual criticism, and translation, which is the skills that I gained in ancient history, and they're applied to this particular project. So I was able to, so there was some overlap there, but I am not, for example, a total Hitler historian. I couldn't give you expert knowledge on all things Hitler, just this one subject I published on. But so that's why it's unexpected. It wasn't my field, World War II Hitler studies history. But no, the spoiler is I think, after having read the table in both versions of the original German, and seeing how the French doctored it, how the English doctored it, and then now, even after reading Mikael Nielsen's findings in terms of how the table talk was distorted over time, like the signal distortion, even putting all that together, I think there's enough evidence in the table talk to suggest that Hitler was actually privately anti-Catholic. He was publicly a Catholic and, totally pro-Catholicism. Privately, he made fun of Catholicism in all the ways that Protestants always did. So he's actually attacking Catholicism from the POV of a Protestant. And then all the weird Christian views that he does espouse privately in the table talk all align with positive Christianity, which was the sect of Christianity promoted by the Nazis specifically. And there are very distinctive, weird beliefs that signify this Christian belief. They believe Jesus Aaron, he was sticking it to the Jews rather than being a Jew himself. And that it was all it was basically Jesus was part of the master race trying to preach the errors of Judaism, right? That's their version of this. And they do believe in God. They believe in God. They believe in old earth creationism. They believe in that they'll go to heaven. They believe in heaven, that the believers will get there. And they believe weirder things, like that Paul was actually an enemy of the church, so that the letters of Paul should be rejected as attempts to sneak Judaism back into the church, which is really weird if you know anything about Paul. It's a very strange belief to advocate. So this idea that Paul was the originator.
That's always shocked me, but yeah, please, I apologize for it. I've heard that one, but that's weird. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Positive Christians and Hitler himself in the Table Talk are often ranting against Paul as the founder of Judeo-Bolshevism, which was the great nemesis of Nazism, right? That was their primary enemy, was this sort of atheistic communism. And it's all blamed on Jews. It's all Jews are responsible for it. So it all ties in somehow in their weird worldview. So Hitler does appear to be a positive Christian in the way he voices his attacks on the church. And so when you read it, you have to understand it from that perspective, that if he's attacking the church, even in the authentic German, and oftentimes the English makes him attack the church when he didn't in the German, but even in the German, when it sounds like he is, if you look in context, he's actually attacking Catholicism. He thinks the Catholic Church is a joke. And real Christianity is free of institutions. That was Hitler's position. So that's the spoiler. That's what I've uncovered about this, and I've written a few blogs about it. People want to catch up on the latest story of what Mikhail Nielsen is publishing. He's coming out with a book very soon, in fact, on this. But you can go to my blog at richardcarrier.info, .info, and then search Hitler in the right margin search screen, and you can get my articles on it.
And we'll be dropping a link to that in the live chat in just a second, and we will make sure that gets into the description. It's not there yet, but and Tony was, so I guess there was a stream last night, and it was Nate Brody, and it was the one where I was maligned by the lamp. It was ugly. It was bad, but they had some technical issues, and a certain troll who shall remain nameless. I'm going to derail the conversation for just 1 second. But there was a certain troll who's in our live chat right now, who shall remain nameless, who basically said, well, Nate Brody's getting all his production values from Nick. So I first of all, really resent that remark. It takes half an hour sometimes, but we do get the show running, and we eventually get sound to all the people involved. We do. So I really resent that. The second thing is, Tony, I do want to quote Tony Designs. He dropped this he said, bite me Streamlabs. And we do have the poll up and running. The poll was slow. The poll is done by Streamlabs, and we do have it up. So anyone who wants to, and we have some people who've already engaged in it, and that's great, and I appreciate it. But Tony has a special relationship with Streamlabs. It's really quite special, because Streamlabs clearly understood him early on before anyone else did, because every time he opened up his mouth, he would be insta-blocked by Streamlabs. And to this day, we don't know how or why, but it was for like 3 or 4 weeks. We had to disable Streamlabs so he could talk in the live chat. It was that bad, and he honestly thought it was me. I was like, dude, it says Streamlabs is doing this. I can't even fake that. It was just, so Tony's bitter, obviously. He's still, and it was, I did figure out roughly, I was able to disable what was doing it. It was the automated checking to see if you're posting like swear words and all that other stuff, and for whatever reason he'd talk and he got flagged by it. He didn't have to say, he just talked and poof, flagged by it. So it's like, obviously it knows him and has a grudge. But yes, Tony's not a fan of Streamlabs. I'm sorry, Tony. We do have a poll. Please, what is the poll? Well, you should see it up there. I don't actually have the 1 for no religion, 2 for Christianity, a few others, and we'll get to the results of that, but that's his special relationship. So, Courtney, I think you were going to ask a question.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm kind of curious. There, like you said, there is kind of a difference between what the established Nazi Party advocated for in their religious ideas versus what Hitler would have believed himself, and so I almost wonder the importance of this topic, if people care more about what Nazism believed in and brought forth as their moral code, or if it's about what Hitler personally believed in. I think it's more to do with the Nazi Party, because when people talk about, this is where atheism leads, they're talking about the horrors of, what Nazis did, and it's a little less about the personal beliefs of Hitler himself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think no, that makes too much sense. Actually, what I find is that the Christians who actually, I'll explain what I mean. The Christians who make this argument, and it's generally only Christians who make this argument. They're not even thinking about, and certainly they don't want to think about the Nazi Party, because if you start bringing the Nazi Party into it, there's tons of evidence of how they were using church and Christianity and to push their views, how their views actually, whole platform comes from Lutheranism. It's Martin Luther's platform against the Jews is almost identical against the Jews. So it brings in all this suppression of atheists and free thinkers. Like, they actually actively took out there was the German Free Thinker Society they banned, and constantly condemning atheism is somehow associated with communism, just like McCarthyism. So McCarthyism and Nazism are actually very similar in the way they use patriotic Christianity to control populations through fascism. So if you talk about Nazis, you lose the argument. So if you can make it about Hitler, it's all about Hitler. He drove everything. Everybody was just mesmerized by Hitler, and it's all Hitler. He's the cause of everything. Then you can cherry pick quotes that make Hitler sound like an atheist and say, see, atheism caused Hitler, Hitler caused Nazism, therefore atheism's bad. And so this is the argument they need. Now, of course, that's a very naive way of looking at the world, but Christians, especially Christian apologists and Christian fundamentalists, often see the world in a very naive way. So this, I think the world works. But like, I really thought is what you said, like that, if you really want to understand this, you need to look at the rise of Nazism as a general phenomenon. Hitler was caused by Nazism. It's not the other way around, right? So, so that's why that's like what you said is the way you should be looking at it. The way we should be looking at it, particularly because there were atheist Nazis. So a case in point, Martin Bormann, who was secretary, I don't remember what his exact position was, but he's basically Hitler's in charge of all of Hitler's administrative stuff. And Bormann is the one who was assembling this German document that became the Table Talk. And he's actually responsible for editing it. He changed a lot of things and actually inserted stuff. We actually have concrete proof that he did this. And Bormann himself was an atheist naturalist. He thought, like, God is a metaphor, there's only the natural world and stuff like this. And he kind of makes Hitler push this in the edited version of the Bormann manuscript, rather than the original version, or the versions that we get Bormann's editing. So so that's a key thing. And so they did accept atheists in their purview as long as you pushed kind of like the neocon version of atheism, which is, we need religion to control the masses, so don't slag off religion. Talk about it being a metaphor, talk about it being important in that way, and then toe the party line, which is the state, everything must serve the state. So whatever you do, you can't be a free thinker. You can be an atheist, but your atheism has to serve the state. And so that was the fundamental idea of Nazism. I mean, obviously you couldn't be a Bolshevist, so you couldn't be a communist. That would be bad. So, but there are very few. There were some atheists like that, but there are also neo-pagans. So Nazism actually allowed under its umbrella neo-pagans. So we have some examples of that in Nazi. So if you were to try to list type Hitler, you would have to have neo-pagan. And the evidence suggests no, I'm supporting that. But there were prominent Nazis who were in Hitler's cabinet even. So I think Himmler, was it Himmler or Heim? Oh, I can't remember. One of them, someone significant, was a neo-pagan. But and anti-atheist, that was the other thing. Even the neo-pagans wanted to shut down atheist meetings and ban atheists from serving in the military, actually. So there may actually have been some atheists who were killed in the Holocaust for atheism, depending on how their atheism was perceived politically.
Well, I think that's an important distinction. So first of all, he did close the Free Thinker Society. So, I mean, he closed that. It does appear like he did make kind of a significant assault on free thinkers, which is sort of a subset of atheists, as opposed to perhaps the atheists that you had been talking about. So now, if I recall, and please correct me if I'm wrong, when you joined the SS, you actually had to certify that you were either Protestant or Catholic. And they would not accept in the SS people who were at least who declared atheism. And I do believe atheists were also, the very few were rounded up as were gays, people forget that it wasn't just the Jews. Gypsies, atheists, homosexuals were also rounded up, but the Jews were obviously got the brunt of it.
Yeah, it reminds me. I don't know if we talked about it last time, but or a previous time, but there was the new Rammstein video, Deutschland. The video for the song, they show the band members being hung in the Holocaust, and the band members are wearing the badges or the patches they would be wearing in the camps for what their crime would have been, and one of them is communist, for example. So that was political, and that usually atheists would get persecuted under that label as political enemy of the state, because especially if you're criticizing religion, that criticizing the state can't have that. So atheists and religious were condemned by the Nazi Party as bad eggs, basically, problems for society.
So the thing that I kind of talk about with people is the dangers of political, like, of ideology, of dogmatic ideology specifically, that has kind of the potential to cause a huge amount of harm more than other things. And so people talk about, religious ideology being the worst version of that because there's no reality check of time to tell you whether what they were saying was accurate or not. It's kind of, the proof is like in the afterlife. So in that sense, we talk about,
okay,
yeah. So in that sense, we talk about like the dangers of religion, but I think that political ideology is also a huge issue where you get a lot of different things like white supremacy and just things that are a set of beliefs that are removed from the world that motivate people to act on those beliefs in a negative way.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've said on my blog that I think political ideologies are the new religions. I think fundamentalism is dying out because it's too medieval. Like, nobody believes in demons and magic and stuff anymore. So the old worldviews just don't make sense. So people are switching to similar fundamentalisms, but that are secular fundamentalisms. And so you have sort of the incel movement, the boogaloos. You've got Marxism has already claimed that mantle, but you have even Trumpism is becoming kind of an ideology. You've got the QAnon thing. The people who would normally race to fundamentalist religions are racing political ideologies that are secular, but just as just as dangerous and just as dramatic. And they're defended with all the same mechanisms. They have their own mythologies. They have their own suppression mechanisms. They have their own salvation narrative. And you'd mentioned like religions being the worst because it's all reserved for the afterlife to find out. But Marxism got around that by saying, it'll be the utopian future, like a physical future we'll get to. Just keep working, keep supporting the communist state. Eventually we'll get there. And it's the exact same thing. In heaven, it's just it's heaven delayed, right? It's the exact same strategy.
Right.
Support us, that'll happen. And then, it happens, 50 years, it doesn't happen. But trust us, it'll happen. But that's what, Christians say. Well, Jesus hasn't come yet. Trust us, 2,000 years. That's not that long. It'll come anytime now. They keep kicking that can down the road. Marxism did the same thing. Yeah. And political ideologies do the same thing. Like keep supporting Trump eventually. Let's have a race war. Everything will turn out around. It's a sort of a paradise after it, right? If you think about it, they all have kind of like, to fix the world, you have to do X. X is something terrible, but you have to keep doing it. But it's the same thing of paradise deferred. Like it'll be better in the future if you do this thing now. And so I see these secular ideologies that are just as dogmatic and just as dangerous are basically identical to religion. The only thing that's different is that they've dropped the supernatural parts of it and the superstitious parts of it. Other than that, they're the same thing. And I think it's dangerous for us to not recognize that.
Yeah, that was exactly what the Nazi Party did with the argument of creating a utopian society, of like having the Aryan race be on top and getting rid of things that will poison the gene pool. And that wasn't, I don't think that had too much of a religious point to it, because there was a lot of doctor involvement in the science of it, and the execution of that, of starting with sterilizing certain communities, and then and then like isolating other communities, and then eventually getting into this kind of euthanasia that they would use the term of, that eventually became, you know, the final solution. So they're softening the terms and making it
Yeah.
seem like a humane thing to do with like inhuman populations, is the argument that was made. And so, but what's so dangerous about that is that it is a utopian society that they're aiming toward, and it's kind of a necessary evil in the time of now so that you can get to a better future for your grandchildren.
Yeah, spot on. And it was very much with religion and science. Because you had first going into it, you had the Jews are responsible for all the evils of the world. That's a Lutheran idea. That was a Christian anti-Semitic idea. Comes out of the Middle Ages, line for line. And even with the whole idea of white versus black, the whites are superior to the blacks, that was actually a Christian ideology. It was developed late. It was, what was Du Bois said, like it was, before the age of exploration, there were no white people. His whole idea is like this idea that Germans and Brits and French and all this stuff would see themselves as a common race against black people was an ideology that didn't exist before the 1400s. It was invented when we needed to subjugate colored people and turn them into slaves to create the sort of justification for slave ideology. So we racialized. It's not happened before. That was not a thing that existed before. And so all things of the religious book. You have the Curse of Ham and they had all the excuses they contracted out of Christianity to justify the system they wanted to create. And so they created white supremacy out of the Bible and out of greed and other standard human foibles. And so this all long predates Nazism. And by the time you get to the Nazi view, so they have this idea that there's a certain ideal of who's the greatest, and that Christianity supports that. And so now they need science to back it up. So they do what you were just talking about, trying to get these
eugenics.
Evil lawyers to justify. Yeah, but even like what Nick was just talking about with Trump's stuff, you find this evil lawyer to create post hoc rationalizations from the law for these things. The Nazis did the same thing. They went to scientists of similar ideology and had them create post hoc scientific justifications for what really originated as religious ideologies.
Well, I think it's interesting.
Expanding the idea even further. Let's get rid of crippled people. Let's get rid of, so they're like, it takes over as well and creates the whole euthanistic concept. And so you have this feedback loop between religion and science once you allow religion to dictate what science is doing. Yeah.
Like that. This is the classic eugenics justification of see, they're similar.
Could you actually just could you bring that a little closer? Or so you may have to put yourself out of screen, but just so. Oh my God, yeah. Oh wow, that's cute.
So this is from my psychology and social context, but this is my textbook. But it's all in this book of eugenics and the history of that and how it was tied to psychology, but also like German doctors. It was in England. It was in America. It was a very widespread idea that really took off and harmed a lot of people across the world, not just in Germany and Poland and in the Holocaust.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was this feedback loop between religion and science. And so when you allow religion to co-opt science, and in particular a sort of an ideological religion that already has toxic ideas, science can be recruited to support those toxic ideas and even expand them. And so that's what happened, I think. And it wasn't just, like you said, it wasn't just the Nazis doing it. They sort of took it to its natural conclusion. And they sort of perfected it in a way. I guess the Germans were way too good at perfecting things. So the last people you want to give these ideologies to, because then they would just take it to like the most systematic system ever. I mean, I often joke to people that all our weapons today were all invented by the Nazis. So the assault rifle, the cruise missile, the tank armor technologies, the rocket-propelled grenade, like all of the things that are standard tech now are all Nazi perfections of war machinery that we now just co-opt and improve upon. So that if you give a task, they will like fucking make the perfect version of it, even if it's evil. It'll be the perfect version of that evil thing. So
yeah.
Well, one of the things I find interesting
Okay.
is this concept of the utopia, and the reason I find it interesting is because aside from there's philosophical issues about what is utopia and how you could, but people talk about we really in this country want to get back to the 50s at sort of that time, and on the grounds that back then a single earner family could actually have a car, have a house, and afford college, and those things are all true. But it ignores
Well,
that was a
I
utopia
should
for
say true for white.
well,
I should
yeah,
say true for white people.
exactly.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. We're gonna have to
utopia
put that in context.
is for a very,
Yeah.
it's a narrow, and so all
Yeah.
of these utopias is really tailored to what a very small, which I actually have the same obviously objection to religion, which is if you don't like, people don't, the religion doesn't adopt the person adopts the religion. If you start to sit there and say, oh, I got some issues with Catholicism, oh, there's something called Protestant, oh, nope, oh, well, I could be a Lutheran or a Methodist. You pick based on what your values already are and the church that
What
reflects that. And
resonates with you?
yeah, exactly. And so these utopias that they each talk about is this sort of idealized version that you have, and it caters to you and your party, your group, or whatever. And it usually involves eliminating anybody who dissents or is different. And that's the part I find scary about the utopia is the utopia is usually a utopia, but it's a utopia for a very specific set of people that you're talking to, and for everybody else, it's kind of a living hell.
Yeah, and even for them, it
Yeah,
might not be.
they had that.
The 50s, even for white
Yeah.
people, was not the utopia thing. But you were going to say, Courtney.
Yeah. Oh well, the Handmaid's Tale. I love that show, and there's a line in the show that I hope I get it right. It was like better. So it's a commander who is a man of a lot of status, talking to a handmaid who has no power and is kind of being used as a mule of fertility, and he says, we made it better, and she's like, better, and he says, better doesn't always mean better for everyone. Or I think he actually says better never means better for everyone. And that's a really interesting line, because as people gain more power and status and wealth, that gets distributed to them and away from other people. So yeah, that's a whole topic. But
we've made that point about the 50s in terms of race, but also there are economic and political reasons for the difference. So you're talking about like a single wage earner supporting a family. That's because the wage disparity between the bottom rungs and the upper rungs of a corporation, for example, or a business, a CEO versus line worker, wages were much higher then. And the 50s was built on the back of the socialist New Deal, right? So like so people have this idea that it was this capitalist utopia, but in fact it was at our most socialist in reality. And then it was also in the most like this idea of that wages should be high rather than we should crush them as low as possible for the good of the bottom line. Like that wasn't so like, but that's what's become the case. We're like trying to eliminate the socialist state, and we're trying to create larger income disparity between line workers and CE and so on, which is actually the cause of everything that's worse that people want undone, but they don't realize that that they're actually fighting against the cure, right? So they're against any effort to reduce income disparity. They're against any effort to have social services, to increase the amount of socialist safety net for people. They're against the very things that made the 50s viable for anyone, really. So, because they just don't study the actual causal history.
Well, and the marginal tax rate then was 91%. Marginal tax rate. That's the upper tax rate if you're making millions of dollars. It was 91% for anything over that.
Yeah, I think it fell to like 70% or somewhere around there by the end of the 50s, but still way like double what it is now.
I'm going to check. It was 91% for most of the 50s. I mean, it was high. It did start to fall. I don't think it fell that rapidly, but it was extraordinarily high.
What happened? It was like the 30s or 40s, I think, when that occurred. Now, mind you, they did get around it. like the same way everybody gets around the tax rate. So the actual tax after deductions, yada yada, might not be as high. But the point being is that they were drawing a lot more revenue from the wealthy back then, a lot more than they are now relative to how things used to be. So yeah.
Well, and now, okay, so so I've got the marginal tax rates now. So this is, I think this could be interesting. But now it's like we talk about raising the marginal tax rate by 2%, and we talk about raising like capital gains from 15 to 17, and people are like, socialism. It's like it used to be in the 90s. So here's what we got from the Tax Policy Center. It was actually like 100 years ago, it was 7%. It jumped to 87, stuck in the high, and then there's a lot of fluctuation. In 1943, it went up to 88%. Then it went up to 94% marginal tax rate. Stayed in the 80s and 90s till about 1951. So in 1951, the marginal tax rate was 91%. 91% top marginal tax rate. It stayed at either 91 or 92% until 1963.
Oh, really? It lasted that long? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And then it dropped to 77%. So you had the numbers right. I had no idea. So you absolutely had the numbers
wrong
right.
Decade.
It's just the wrong decade.
But the wrong decade.
When we're talking about the 50s, 91 or 92% marginal tax rate. And I've heard so many conservatives say, let's get back to
the 50s. That's the highest income bracket, but
Yeah, exactly.
Right,
let's go back to the 50s.
Still,
let's do everything. And it's like, do you understand how they succeeded in that? The way they succeeded was with a 91%. That's how you do it. And that's what people are saying now. If we do that, we can get back to that. And people are like, no, we want to get back to that, but with a 17% marginal tax rate so that the corporations can make all the money and we'll still succeed and do it. That's not how they did. I don't.
No,
Yeah. Well,
that's true.
The argument,
but this plays into what you were saying about utopias. People invent a utopia in their head, have causal reality totally wrong, and that's how these ideologies get built. That's just like the incels. They have their narrative about how they want to reshape society. It's completely contrary to how reality works. The Boogaloos the same way. The Marxists the same way. Like you pick any political ideology, they have this. They've completely gotten the causal system wrong, but are very adamantly convinced that they're right. And that's the only way to get back to reality, rather than doing just evidence-based reasoning. It's like, let's look at the evidence. What actually did work to accomplish what we want? That's the difference between ideology and evidence-based politics, I think.
But I also think that it's highly motivated by money in politics and having it. There's a vested interest in keeping the status quo of money being where it is now, and so that's. And the people who are most interested in that are the people who influence the laws that are made and the policies and everything like that. So I think that's the bigger issue too, is having the democracy that we have try to be more of a democracy of the interests of the many being more of a consideration. But that's kind of also a pipe dream as well, there being a lowering of money in politics.
Well, even if you look at it, like people might respond to that by saying, well, actually, if only voters would vote their interests, these would not be able to do what they're doing, right? But the problem is that to do that, you have to be properly educated to understand what your interests actually, right? To actually understand how you being played, when these. But that requires specific improvements to the education system that conservatives always specifically oppose. And in fact, just recently, like Trump was going on a rant. I think it was in what was it? It was the latest Chris Wallace interview. I think, and Wallace was like really nailing him on this, but on various other things as well. But Trump was going on about how we're destroying education by including all of these. The things he objected to were any attempt. If you look at the list, there were any attempt to put more political reality into education so that students actually understood how we got where we are based on the actual political history of the United States. So, like, for example, how did slavery actually work? What did slavery actually do? And he was actually against this. It's like, this is a terrible idea. We should oppose this. They're going to destroy America by destroying education. And that's really the thought. Like, in any attempt to put political into the system, so that come out of where aware of how politics can manipulate people, how bad things can happen, aware of how we got where we are, which would make them smarter voters. Conservatives don't want that, and so they want the myth. They want mythology taught. They want the mythology of American history taught. They don't want truth.
Yeah.
And where does that come from? That comes all the way up from who's paying for it, right? And so that's the elites again. DeVos, the freaking what is millionaire, billionaire? How much freaking money does DeVos
please
have?
Please don't. I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher. I quit teaching. I left teaching. Quit implies I would never go back, but I left teaching. I was teaching high school. I left right before she came in, and I remember I was like, "Oh, I bailed." And I would call up my teachers every now and then. I still call up my friends, like, "How's it going?" They're like, "You would not believe the practical impact of everything we should cover that at some point."
It's a shame,
but and everybody in every school, and the teachers I've talked to, they're like, "This is destroying education. It is handicapping everybody, and she's pulling money out of schools that need it because, well, they need it, so obviously we can't give it to them."
Yeah, and then she'll blame them on their bad performance, right?
Yeah.
And say like, "See, you're not using your money well. Why should we give you more?" Like it's this kind of, But anyways, the point being is she's part of the moneyed elite. So this ties into what you were saying, Courtney. That I do think they're controlling it not just through like bribery of politicians, but they're actually trying to control and manipulate society. And way too many Americans are too easily duped by this. They're just not, which is ironic because they're so skeptical of the conservative voters are so skeptical of the deep state and all of these other things, and completely oblivious to the actual ways that they're being manipulated and kept ignorant and controlled.
That's true.
Which is so frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating, and I don't really have a solution for it. But
and people in rural areas are more likely to vote conservative because of their local TV news propaganda that comes through and kind of manipulates them into believing certain things and playing on their
that's another
fear
example
of the other and fear of all things. So so the information and the echo chamber of the internet and all that too. But meaning that it is interesting that the people who tend to vote conservative in the rural areas, those are the most negatively affected by the policies that are made by that side of the aisle. And the other issue too is that the money in politics is not just reserved for the conservative side. And so I think the other issue, apart from education and knowing what issues you should be focusing on that are of interest to you, is the lack of options in this two-party system and there being a continuation of the status quo as well. So that's not good.
Yeah, there unfortunately is not a solution to that. There's a theorem in political science that I think is fairly well demonstrated. I can't remember what it's called, but the principle is that when you have a system organized the way ours is, it's winner-take-all system, you either get the seat or you don't, it always ends up two-party. So that you can never have a three-party system. It's causally impossible. No matter how hard you try, it will never happen.
Really?
You can only get multiple parties. Yeah, you can multiple parties if you have a parliamentary system where percentage of voters determines percentage of ownership of the House. So for example, if 20% of voters are libertarian, then 20% of the House of Representatives will be libertarian, because basically they vote for the party and the party mans the seats. Right, so that's the only way you can have a multi-party system is if you've got a percentage representation system, rather than a winner takes all, where one person, so everybody votes regardless. Now you could theoretically maybe have smaller influences. It will never be dominant parties, but you can have smaller representation of parties if you have a forced ranking system, which some states are actually starting to move toward. And forced ranking is where when you go and vote, you don't vote for a person. You rank all the candidates, and if the person if no one gets a majority of the number one slot, it goes to number two, and so on down the line. So that you could go and vote for. Let's say you're a Sanders fan, but you also don't want to not vote for Hillary Clinton. You would go and you put Sanders 1, Hillary 2, right? That you would do it like that, and then if everybody voted a certain way, then maybe at worst case scenario you'll still get Clinton instead of your Sanders or Trump, right? So like you could have a smarter system for that, and that would actually prevent voting because a lot don't want to waste their vote. Like they say, like I don't like him, so I'm just not going to vote at all or whatever. But you could go and you could put Sanders at the top and Clinton at number 2, and still you've satisfied yourself psychologically while you've also created a sort of backstop in case the worst happens, right? So like you can you just basically force rank who you want, and then the voting system operates that way. And I think Maine is working this way, or there's some elections in Maine that operate this way now. If I remember correctly, people can internet Google that and find out. But I know there's a lot of interest in it happening. In addition to eliminating the Electoral College, there's a backdoor elimination process going on where the states themselves are going to get rid of it, as long as enough states go on board. So there's many states have already passed a law. Many states have passed a law that as soon as the majority of votes, the Electoral College votes, are decided by popular vote, then their Electoral College will follow the same way. So that they basically put a trigger clause in that will go on board as soon as enough other states go on board. It will de facto eliminate the Electoral College without rewriting the Constitution. So it basically just has each state assign electoral votes according to the national popular vote or something like that. I can't remember exactly how it works, but you can go and look and Google that as well, like the backdoor solution to the Electoral College. But you have to have enough states on board, and right now Republicans don't benefit from that. I mean, Trump lost the election by popular vote. So the conservatives are against this. They don't like it.
Every time the Electoral College has, quote, unfairly, and I'm going to suggest unfairly because it depends on whether you think because it's constitutional, is it really unfair? But anytime the Electoral College has, quote, unfairly benefited one candidate, or that the Electoral College has chosen over the popular vote, it has benefited the Republicans every single time, and there's a number of reasons why that occurs. Yeah, so they're not going to. It occurs that way for a number of reasons. But I want to quickly just take. We've had a couple of subscriptions, so thank you all for subscribing. If you're enjoying the show, please like and subscribe. We would appreciate that. It really helps out the show. We also do have a live poll going, which I think I'm going to be closing reasonably soon. But we've got so far for what religion, 3 votes for none, 4 votes for Christianity, none for deist, none for Nordic blood rights, and 1 for other. Yeah, you like that one. So I wanted to ask. I've heard it suggested. Now, I personally, it looks to me like he was actually about to go after the Catholic Church heavily, which I think is sort of what you had suggested, but he was starting to kick out the Catholics. Now, he had his first concord with the Catholic Church, that's true, but he betrayed Stalin. I mean, he really betrayed Stalin, and I think he's not, because he's willing to say one thing and do another. So, but I've heard it suggested that maybe he even might have been headed towards, at least in his own mind, thinking maybe he was the Messiah. Do you think that that's arguable? Do you think there's any evidence for that, or that's a crackpot theory?
Whoa. Are we talking about Hitler, or are we talking about Trump now?
Oh, geez. All right. So, I think just to clarify, I was obviously talking about Trump. I would like to get back to the topic at hand, but I meant Trump, and I will get back to. So if we could answer that for Trump first, and then we'll talk about. For the sake of keeping it tight, let's do Hitler.
That's right. Well, Hitler, we only really know years later once documents come to light and stuff like that. Like we're kept in the quiet about a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on, but. Yeah, absolutely. That's trying to do the same narrative, but yeah, there's some evidence, and in Hitler, Homer, Bible, Christ, right, that has the review article in it. At the end of that, I have an epilogue, and in the epilogue, I discuss some of this other evidence. And I think I do anyway. And yeah, there's some indications that the ultimate goal of the Nazi Party, and Hitler was on board with this, was that in the end, in the victorious Third Reich, that there would be just one national church. And it would not be Catholic or Protestant or any of this stuff. It would just serve the state. And it would not be a religious institution per se. It would just sort of make sure everyone is the right kind of Christian, basically. And that included, you could be a metaphorical Christian. You could be an atheist. You could be a neo-pagan. But you had to sing. It's all about behavior, right? So you had to sing the right behavioral line. And they didn't care so much what your ideology was that got you to agree with the Nazis on everything, as long as it did. And in this, the idea would be that Hitler would be the Messiah predicted by Jesus. He would be kind of he did believe he was God's vessel, that God had appointed him to do this, and he was doing God's work, and that's unmistakable. He talks about it several times, and there's some indication that he would start marketing himself in the Third Reich as that the ascendant Messiah. It's going to bring in, like we're talking Utopia, right? So and that he would be the head of the church and all of this stuff. So yeah, they did have that design. And yeah, absolutely, they would have crushed the Vatican eventually. Like, I have no doubt that there's no way they would have allowed the Vatican as an institution to go on independently existing during the Third Reich. Once they'd conquered the world, which they actually came way closer to than people realize, they would have gotten rid of those institutions. Same way they'd already started getting rid of the liberal churches in Germany, which the Catholics supported, ironically, ironically, because it's one of those classic examples of where the Catholic Church was supporting exactly what was going to be done to them, not this, right? Like, it's like, oh, actually, maybe we shouldn't do that so that it doesn't get done to us in the end. But people are so blindsided by prejudice that they don't see how the machinery that they support to suppress others will eventually be used against them. Which is why we can't have that machinery, and that's why we have a constitution. Like, that's not, people forget that's the whole point of these things.
You hit the nail on the head, because that's actually what we've been discussing, because there are some people who are for Trump basically without any due process that's at least transparent,
right, exactly.
Yanking people off and it's sort of like the two problems are, first of all, they haven't done this to anybody who's exercising their Second Amendment constitutional rights to concealed carry. But if we had a few people on who said, listen, if I was carrying a firearm and a small mom minivan, I mean, this was an unmarked minivan, pulls out and a whole bunch of people with masks and everything come out after me, 50-50, I start shooting. So that hasn't happened yet, but it's going to if this keeps up. But the other thing is, everybody says, well, hey, this program is great because it's cleaning up the protesters and all this other stuff, but it's cleaning up people who have ideas that he doesn't like. That's all. So far, the people that have been arrested, it appears, were just protesting, not rioting. One may have done graffiti and the problem is he's not going to be in office forever. So what happens when either A, somebody who is a conservative, has the same ideologies that he does, but is much more genuinely interested in being a dictator, which I don't think he consciously, that's what he's looking for, and then utilizes that, or you get a Democrat who just goes the other way and a liberal, but now has those. But the whole reason you never give these powers even to the people you like is because the people you don't are going to be in office at some point.
Yes, exactly right. And people don't see this causal step. It's very frustrating that they can't see how they're putting themselves in danger by supporting these policies. That is the lesson. That is the lesson of Hitler and the Nazi Party. I think we should take that away.
Well,
but in this case, it's not even what is it? Godwin's law? What's the phrase? I forget.
Goodwin's law.
Hitler. Goodwin's. Is it Goodwin's law?
That Hitler will come up in every conversation. On a long enough timeline, Hitler will come up in any Twitter.
Right. The idea that everybody you hate is a Nazi, everybody you hate is Hitler. Yeah. No, this is actually legitimate. This is a legitimate historical point, is that what's happening now here very much tracks what's happening in Nazi Germany. So we need to be, and it's not like it's...
That's not.
There's a really good video.
Richard, you're not using hyperbole. I really wish you were. And I have so many times. This show's been going on for a while now, and when people have used hyperbole against Trump, I have shut it down because it causes a lot of problems, especially if you end up in the real situation. Richard, you're not using hyperbole. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Please finish, but you're not. No.
There's a good video by Dan Arrow. I linked to it in my... so I wrote an article heavily criticizing Jordan Peterson, and it's basically a thorough fisting of his entire worldview. And that's the article in which, at the end, I talk about how secular ideologies are replacing supernatural ideologies. They're replacing the new religions. I got that in the end of that article. But I also talk about Dan Arrows and his video on... Peterson rails against this comparison of Hitler and the Nazis and current policies. Well, I don't know if he specifically said this, but others have said this. The policies against the immigrants in cages, right? Well, that's not concentration camps, right? Like, that's not the same. And Dan Arrows did a video on this and say, well, actually, let's follow the actual boiled frog of Germany, and you can see the trajectory phase, right?
Yeah.
Like, and eventually ends up there. And that's just like, that's what we're concerned that we're there. We're saying you're heading in a bad direction that we do not want to go in.
Yeah.
And we've seen this before. Never
Yeah.
forget. You've forgotten, apparently. It's the people
Yeah.
we're talking to. you aren't paying attention to history.
Yeah.
And he has this excellent video where he actually uses quotes that you cannot tell, and they're from both sides of political parties on this issue. You cannot tell if they are modern American political quotes or proto-Nazi Germany quotes. And it is so marvelously done. Spoiler, they're all Nazi Germany. But it's where you have the liberals and the conservatives, like, they're different versions of reality of what's happening on the border and stuff. They're almost identical to Ocasio-Cortez's representation of what she saw when she went there versus Republicans who went there and said, oh, it wasn't so bad, yada, yada. Almost word for word, like, you couldn't tell the difference. Like, wait a minute, was that something said by Cortez? Was that something said by Jeff Sessions? Like, I don't know, I can't tell. And so that's the point, is that it's we don't want to beat a boiled frog. And for those who don't know the metaphor, the frog you slowly boil never jumps out because at no point does it realize that it's boiling, because you don't immediately turn the heat up. You just gradually cook it. And that's the problem that you can look out for, is like you need to see these dangerous steps. And the things you're talking about at the open of show are a perfect example of dangerous steps that we really need to be concerned about.
Well, and that's the boiled frog is the analogy I was looking for. I was looking for an analogy, and I kept clumsily. And you're right, the boiled frog is absolutely it. And one of the things I talk about too is Pinochet, Augusto Pinochet, who was the just brutally ruthless dictator of Chile. And what he would do, his program started the exact same way, which is they would pick these people up and then they'd hold them a bit longer, and then they'd let them go. Then they would pick them up, beat them, and let them go. And it was to send a message: you need to be terrified, you need to stop. And he started with drug dealers, he started with gang lords, he started with all these terrorists. Like, oh, hey, this is great.
Yeah.
And then, one day, like, somebody was very critical of him, wrote a critical editorial, and all of a sudden he gets picked up. And they don't even hurt him. They do nothing to him, but they hold him in a dark room. He's got a hood on. He can't see. A few hours later, they let him go, and there's no evidence. And he sits there and says, this just happened to me. I'm like, well, what do you mean? And there was no iPhones or nothing, and it was just this secret thing. And then it gets a little worse, and then poof, one day one of them just vanishes. Nobody ever sees him again. There's no body. There's no nothing. Nobody has any idea what happened. And some people say, well, yeah, we all know Pinochet's a bad guy. He said something critical of Pinochet. He probably fled the country. He got out of here long before. We don't know. There's no evidence. There's no nothing. And what was determined years later was that he was taking these people, going to the airport, putting them in an airplane, flying out over the ocean, and throwing them out the door. And there'd be no body, no evidence, no nothing, and nobody knows for certain what happened. And they were picked up by these gangs of police that would come in massed and that do everything that just happened 5-6 days ago in Portland. The difference is in Portland, right? I mean, they're starting the same way, and except in Pinochet actually started with really bad people. In Portland, they're starting with a guy who put graffiti on a building, ostensibly. Nobody knows for certain. But that's where it went out, and his justification was simple. It was that I'm trying to save this country from descending into darkness and evil, and I'm the only one who can do it. So when you undermine me, you are undermining the entire country. So that makes undermining me illegal and a criminal act. And the problem is, if you go to Trump's July 4th speech, where he basically says all liberals, he starts with, and it was cute because he starts with just the extremist liberals are doing these terrible things, and then he expands to all liberals, and he uses the word, first of all, through the Cultural Revolution. I was like, whoa, that is... Aside from being a charged word, I was impressed. He didn't know what that was. Somebody had to explain it to him, but that was not an accident that terminology ended up in there. So that was unusually erudite for him, but that was no accident. And then he says they're all terrorists and they're trying to undermine. The terrorist part is essentially what he said, but what he said was they are trying to undermine the American Revolution and they have to be stopped. And I'm sitting there going, he's using that language, and this program just started. And you're right. I mean, there are people, I've seen people, and we had yesterday a couple of very harsh, strong conservatives on the show who said, we're standing shoulder to shoulder. This has to be stopped. This is what we as conservatives fight against. Where are the conservatives saying the government is overreaching? The reason I want my Second Amendment rights is to stop the government when they do this. I don't care who they're doing it to. I don't care if it's protesters. I don't care, I don't care if it's... the most evil person on the planet. There's no
Yeah.
receipts. They're released, and there's no evidence they were ever detained. There's no way to find out if there actually was probable cause. Nothing.
Yeah.
No accountability. And now we're about to get a whole bunch of executive orders that I think are going to make things a lot worse. This is, excuse the rant, but anyway, the boiled frog is the, and there are some people who say this is fine, and no, this is not even close to fine. This is the first time he really has crossed the line.
I want to pitch again that Dan Arrows video I was talking about, because that's kind of how he ends the video. He takes Jordan Peterson making a lot of statements that are exactly like this, where like if we constantly focus on, it's always about the Jews, and it often tends to be. If you don't look at all the weird conspiracy theorists, they all hate the Jews. They all hate each other, but they all agree on hating the Jews. But apart from that, you can take the same mechanism of targeting a class of people and turn it on other classes of people. Dan Arrows shows that like Peterson is using the same rhetoric that the Nazis used to turn the guns on the communists and so on. Peterson is using it against feminists and liberals, right? And any attempt to suppress free speech. So he uses the cancel culture as grounds for these are the enemy of the state, right? So you're going from free speech protesting is now your enemy of the state. Now you're a traitor. Now we need to get rid of you. It's like it's really, like you said, going after the First Amendment. Now it's not. I don't think Peterson himself sees that causal sequence. I don't think he's deliberately saying, I want this to happen. It's that the views he's espousing lead there if you don't notice that that's what happened before. And that noticing that requires history, requires doing sound history, not looking at mythologies, but actually studying what actually happened.
Oh, you're talking educate. You ivory tower elitist.
We're back on that, yeah.
You and I are gonna have a talk, sir. Awesome. You and I are gonna have a talk. My gut says you're full of it.
And that's also what's really dangerous about this administration is the parroting of certain historical events, like Hitler being loved by an insane amount of people because of what he promised, because he was seen as of the people, from the people, and he was seen as somebody who was going to be the savior of Germany and bring prosperity back, and scapegoat minority groups or scapegoat the Jewish people, and it's just such a pattern. And obviously, the biggest thing about Germany in that time, especially, is the suppression of information and the complete lack of free press. And what's really scary, I think the biggest red flag for Trump, even if I agreed with anything he did, it would scare the hell out of me that he is so verbally abusive of free press, of media. And he makes a lot of people very suspicious of scientific institutions, and especially of the media. And it's, oh my gosh, it's so scary, because again, you have this government sanctioned media outlet, which, if you look at the history of how Fox News came together, that was built as a parroting of conservative values and supposed to be very tied to conservative White House. So when somebody conservative is in the White House, it was built to be something that can parrot what they have to say. And that goes back.
A vehicle of the money to lead again, as you were saying before. It's the money to lead. Fox created lead capitalists. Its whole function, and always has. And you're absolutely right. That's how it gets used, and people just don't see it. And as with Hitler, the people who just loved Hitler, they just didn't see it. They just believed everything he said. No amount of evidence could ever convince them that he was bad in any way. It's the same kind of delusional patriotism led to that as well. Not being able to criticize even your own beloved leaders. It's not just a state thing. It's criticism is being suppressed. Even more dangerous is when you yourself do not allow yourself to criticize or think that someone your beloved leader has made a mistake. Even you will not fact check your leader. Even you will not say like, well, I better check to make sure that was a good decision or not. Like, I don't necessarily think that he's always right, or maybe I should look at the evidence and so on. If you're not willing to constantly criticize and fact check even your own beloved leaders, that's more dangerous, because then the state doesn't, right? Like, you don't have to spend any money on a Gestapo. If they've got you already, they've got you. Like, that's what people should be most afraid of. That's what the sort of education we need to really impress on people. But of course, as soon as you do that, you have people like Trump saying, like, "How dare you?"
Yeah.
All right, we are going to need to start wrapping up. So, Courtney, why don't you ask a question, then I'll wrap up the poll. Got a little house cleaning we need to do, and then we'll head out. So,
no, I just wanted to finish out by saying the tactic that's a very old song of convincing the people at the bottom that what puts them at the bottom is other people at the bottom that don't look like them or something different about them. That's the classic scapegoat of immigrants, of people of color, all kinds of different scapegoats. It's a very effective thing that if you divide the people at the bottom and say, you're different from this person and you're better than this person because of this, and they're the reason for all of your problems, then you don't look up at the people who make the decisions that negatively affect your opportunity and your circumstance. So I think that's another large issue. Is obviously you have Trump being, very disparaging toward the media, toward the free press, but you also have a very clear message of the scapegoating of certain groups, and that again is a tactic of control, of having the people at the bottom stay there and be happy about it because they never blame the people at the top.
Yeah, as a historian, the thing that I've been trying to impress on people is that we all have a cognitive bias, that we see immediate causation easily. We have a really hard time with causation. And give you an example of this. It's like people who are against taxes, all they see is the money coming out of their check. They don't see where that money benefits them. So they don't causally see that, oh, that's why I don't have potholes in the street. That's why why I can go to the emergency room and not get bankrupt. They don't see all the cops, the firefighters, all the protections that they get, that they're actually profiting. They're actually benefiting more than they're spending, but they don't see the direct causal consequence of where that money is going. All they see is the money's going away. So they're anti-tax because they're not seeing the causal chain of what am I getting for that money. And that's just one example. There's many where people don't see the long chains of causes. So when you have this divide and conquer strategy, you can say, oh, look at all this black on black crime in this urban neighborhood, etc. Don't pay attention to why that's that way. Like, don't look at the long cause. Like, how did that get there? The immediate reality. Oh, isn't that dangerous? Aren't you scared? That plays to people's biases very easily because it's hard work to go, well, actually, okay, why is that neighborhood so bad? Let's look at the causal history of that. And then you start realizing, oh shit, there's like other stuff I should be worried about, not that. But that requires work, that requires understanding that we have this blindness inherent in our brains. Our brains do not see long chains of causes naturally. It's not an intuitive process for us. We have to actually work at it. And to do it, you have to actually have correct information, not mythologies thrown at you. And so that's why history and historical methodology, teaching it properly, is so important as a skill, not just a list of names and dates, not just stuff to memorize, which tends towards mythology rather than learning how to be a historian, how to think historically in a rational way. That's what we should be teaching students in schools, is how to think about history, how to fact check history reliably, and how to look at long I would hope someday we can infuse that into our education system. I don't really know how we'll convince anyone to do that, but it's what we need.
All right. Well, I'm gonna put a pin in this. What I do think I'm gonna have to head out for a while, but I am gonna drop into the Discord for at least a few minutes just to say hi. Anybody who wants to join us in the Discord, we can continue this. Dr. Carrier, we would be delighted to have you in the Discord. I can send you the link if you're not already a member, and I can make sure. I'd also like you, Dr. Carrier, to please send me any links. You have your book, which I'm going to ask you about in a second, and you had also mentioned essay you talked about. So please send me those links, and I will make sure that they get into the. And we're about to close out the chat here. So, Iron Charioteer, hi all. Dr. Carrier, my favorite myth killer. I'm about to close the poll, Iron Charioteer. So if you want to get into it, you slid in under the radar, but you're going to have to go quick. I do want to say too, we've got 46 people watching. Thank you guys all so much on multiple platforms. So the first thing I'll say is, if you like the show, please like and subscribe. If you are not watching here on YouTube, but on like Twitch or something else, we appreciate that. If you like the show, you can find us on In Time Show on YouTube. Come in, subscribe, give us a thumbs up. If you don't like the show, you know what? We're honest and we can take the feedback. You can find us on richardcarrier.com. Give us a thumbs down. We're okay. We really can. We can put up with that kind of criticism. So please go ahead and don't hesitate to do that. You can let us know. So. I'm one of these days someone's going to really hit me hard with that. We'll go like, you know what, smart ass. All right, so I'm going to close out the poll, and we are at, let's see, I say I'm going to close out the poll, but we are at, of course, and I close it, and it ends up, hiding it so nobody can see it. So I guess I'll reopen that. 2 votes for none, 8 votes for Christian, and 1 vote for other. So thank you all for participating in that. Dr. Carrier, we always thoroughly enjoy you coming on the show. And we always learn something, I think, and it's just a delight. We're going to have you back, I think, as soon as we can schedule for the discussion on the philosophy of religion, which was actually a topic that you had proposed, and I think we decided we wanted to do. And have you ever streamed with Ozzy?
Yeah. I don't think so, but who knows? I've done so many things over the years that I might have forgotten.
I love him. He's a great guy. He's been a frequent guest of this show. He and I have been on a number of streams together, and he really knows his stuff. So I think it's going to be a delightful show. So please tell us, could you tell us a bit about your book, where people can find you, and anything else that you want to make sure that the audience knows? Because I think they'd be delighted to hear it. So.
Yeah, it can be found at richardcarrier.info, richardcarrier.info. You can get to my Facebook from there, my Twitter feed from there, my blog feed, all my books. I've got many books out. The one that came up today a lot was Hitler, Homer, Bible, Christ, which has all of my peer-reviewed history work in it up to 2014, plus a variety of other interesting stuff. All for $20, so it's super cheap, usually. Cheaper even than that in electronic form. All my books are read on Audible by me as well, so you can get audio versions of them. I will soon be coming out with Jesus from Outer Space. That will be coming out soon, so that maybe we can do a show on that.
I just thought, based on the title, you are pre-booked for that. Pick a date. Jesus from Outer Space. That is. In fact, actually, I'm recently I've been the one doing the thumbnails. I look forward to the thumbnail for that one. I'm gonna call up. I'm either going to do that one, or I'm going to call up everyone's favorite fugitive from justice and see if he wants to do a graphic designer. But at any rate, please continue.
Yeah, I also teach classes online. So every month I do a 1-month course on either some subject in philosophy or history. So on my blog, you can search classes and see what I'm offering. I offer all the classes that I'm offering are offered any given month, and I'm adding a class every month as we go along. So people who want to basically buy my attention for a month and ask all the questions you had of a PhD on some particular subject, that's the place to go. Plus, I have recommended readings, I have challenge questions, and there's discussions about those. And so it's a way to learn more in depth on issues in philosophy and history, it's particularly in areas that have special expertise in. So I do that, and there's a variety of other things. You can find them all at my website, richardcarrier.info. That's the go, and I'll send links. Always delighted to be on this show, by the way. So always love reading me on anytime.
Thank you. So we have already dropped. Tony Designs has dropped. If you just find him in the live chat, he has dropped the website and a link to the book. And we will also put those into the description. But I am going to need, like I said, Dr. Carrier, and I know you have a Patreon too. So just send me all of that. We will put that in. What I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to keep it so that I already have it, because you've come on enough. I can then just drop it in. I am going to try to remember to change it up, because if we have you on for Jesus from outer space, people are going to be sitting there going, "Why is there a reference to a Hitler book here?" It's gonna confuse people.
Right,
So it may
yeah.
need to be tweaked from show to show, but I'll put that on. Sammy
course.
Jenkins has answered the poll, so the correct answer to the entire poll is 42.
Very good.
Yeah. So barring that, I honestly feel like I'm missing something, but if I am, I can't imagine what it is. Okay, well, no, there's always something. So thank you all for joining us, and let's see, what do we have? I don't even know. I don't have the calendar in front of me, so I honestly can't even answer for people what we have next week. I do apologize. But I'll be in about 5 minutes. I'll be in the Discord. Dr. Carrier, I'll send you the link on Messenger, and if you can join us, great. If not, I certainly understand. Courtney, I hope you can join us. In the meantime, thank you all for watching, and with any luck, there's going to be no breaking news in the next 48 hours. Anyone want to bet?
Gotta go, Nick.
Night all. All right. Thanks.
All righty.
All right.
Had someone scheduled at 2:30.